Good morning and a very warm welcome to everyone present here and join this session online. I, Nikita Mohol, on behalf of Kaladhar Bnca Art Club, take this incredible opportunity of hosting this session of the series Kala Sanwad Art in Conversation with Architecture. Now, I would like to request our guests, Tejas Modak sir and Mayuresh Shirolkar sir, to please grace the stage. I would like to request Tejas sir की तुम्ही प्लीज हार घालून प्रोग्रामला इनॉग्रेट करावं. Thank you, sir. I would request both of you to please take a seat. Now I would like to request Amrita ma'am to introduce us to today's session.
Hello, good morning, and a very warm welcome to our guest speakers today. So we have been talking about performing art forms and their relationship with architecture for the last two sessions. This session differs in its expression. So even I have taken a liberty and dare to give my introductory speech in a poetic form. So I was thinking about an architect and a writer, and this came to my mind when Mayuresh sir said that they had a cup of coffee. They sat together over a cup of coffee, praising self, trying to hold up the trophy. For sharing an aim to build unforgettable spaces, which could be real and be experienced even in the process. The craftsmen working with fragile yet stronger details. May it be glass or steel, or the words with number of phrases. The structure and the form building in an amusing way. It could be simple or complex with an impression to stay. Accents, pauses, punctuation, juxtapositioning of the words. The windows, doors, or hallways may be architectural equivalents. Is it the material space or the narrative transformation? The personified settings with a magical connection. They sat together knowing they are almost similar, falling in love in the most metaphorical manner. So probably this would, there is no need of another introduction to today's session. This would introduce all and everything and all the details, elements, everything that is there, common in both the art forms. Let's see what we find from this wonderful dialogue between these two artists. And welcome, very warm welcome to all the audience as well. Thank you.
So today we have Mayuresh Shirolkar sir with us. Talking about him, he is an architect, interior designer and the HOD of SMEF's Brick School of Interior Design. He is an avid sketcher and a part of Urban Sketchers Pune. While spatial and on-location urban scape sketching, he believes in letting go of much that he sees and likes to draw just the impressions, leaving a lot to imagination. He says this kind of sketching is a whole experience, completely meditative and an exploratory joy. It's almost like looking through binoculars trying to fit a large expanse on something even as small as a stamp. He used to do theatre and therefore is in a constant flux to push his boundaries, intermingling between life-size interiors, paper-size art or mind-size theatre. What he likes in all three is that they are a response to his interactions with the space and all that inhabits it. Welcome, sir. To brief about our guest speaker today, Tejas Modak sir. He is a graphic novelist and a visual artist working in areas spanning comics, fine arts, space design, illustrations, and visual curations for the last 12 years. He graduated in applied arts from Abhinav Kala Mahavidyalaya in 2006. His first graphic novel, Private Eye Anonymous, The Art Gallery Case, was published in 2008 by Westland Books. followed by his second graphic novel, Animal Palette, which was published in 2011 and showcased at the Jaipur Literature Festival. He also did production design for a Marathi film titled Happy Journey in 2014, and since then have also been involved in writing screenplays for films and web. He takes immense pleasure in working in more than one area and believes that handling different mediums tends to feed off each other and is the primary fuel in his creative pursuit. Welcome, sir. Before moving to our main dialogue today, we would like to play an AV of Tejas sir's work that our art club students have compiled.
But they found it amusing enough to give me the first prize. And that first prize was a packet of sketch pens and a set of rubber stamps in the shapes of different animals. And I was fascinated by that. And that's where my love for colors and shapes and patterns and stories really took root. I couldn't have enough of it. I illustrate, I make stories, I make comic books. And I have a lot of fun doing all of that.
Now I would like to request Joshi sir to please grace the stage and felicitate our guests today. Sir, please. Thank you, sir. we can proceed with the dialogue, sir. Thank you.
Hello? Yeah.
On? Yeah.
Yeah. Both. So, when I was thinking about Tejas, I thought about, picture speaks about 1,000 words. Now, here is an artist who actually does visual art and doesn't need too many words. But there has been a transition from a picture, a visual art, to using less words to talk about more. And there's a transition from visual to what we read through to an experiential art. So that's really fascinating, Tejas. So welcome to Bnca Art Club, but I would like to say that it's an art forum more than a club.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you so much. And Dad's been with Bnca. I mean, he was one of the first professors at Bnca since its inception. So Bnca has been almost like an extended family for me since I was at school practically. So
Right.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks.
I would like to start the conversation with asking you about your journey through all these mediums. So can you tell us how it went about? I mean, from an artist to writing screenplays and
Okay, yeah, sure. So, like very funnily, now today we draw a very marked distinction between images and words, right? I mean, obviously they are two different tools that we use to tell stories, and sometimes you're painting and you're using just visuals, and sometimes maybe you're writing a poem and just using words. But for me, primarily, I was a huge comic book fan as a child. I mean, I think the first book that my parents gifted me was a comic book, and I was besotted from the word go. And at that age, when I couldn't even read, I must have been like 2.5 or 3. For me, uh, pictures and words always existed together because my first introduction to any form of art was a comic book. So in fact, I had to unlearn the fact that, okay, pictures can exist separately and words can also exist separately, because right through school, almost my entire worldview was formed of things that I like read in comic books.
Right.
So from there, someone recently asked me, when did you consciously decide you wanted to make comics? And I think comics wasn't even there. It was not one epiphany moment. It was not one sudden realization. I think I always wanted to make comics.
oh,
And because at that point of time in India, you didn't have a specific professional course that academically taught you how to make comics. The most logical thing was to go into either fine art or commercial art. So I got into commercial art, and commercial art at that point of time, most people, the output of that would be like an ad agency or a design studio, and I realized that I don't really think I'm cut out for either space. I didn't feel so at that point of time. And I took a year off after college to work entirely on my comic book.
Right.
So I have a set of very, let's say, supportive folks who, at that time, just allow your son to take a year off and just work on his comic book was quite a thing to do. But yeah, so I started making my comics, and one thing leads to the other, and we'll talk about it, like a complete serendipitous moment where I did a wall mural as part of the Pune Binale that happened in 2013. And that was shared, and the director Sachin Kundalkar saw it because we have a lot of common friends, he also being from Pune. And he was writing Happy Journey at the time, and he was looking for a production designer. So he looked at my work. He knew that I didn't come from the film background, but he was looking specifically for someone outside of the traditional film setup. And he asked me if I jumped at it because I generally love to experiment and try new things.
right.
So that led to doing the production design for Happy Journey, and then on the film set, and we used to discuss stories, and we used to discuss the edit. So that led to collaborating on a script together.
Okay.
So I mean, I think at the root of it, it's all the same, right? It's,
Correct.
So I've been dabbling in a few of these.
So that's brilliant. Is I mean, we talk about it when when we're teaching students or when architects are developing concepts. So they're talking about visual thinking.
Sure.
Is visual thinking behind all this? Like when you're thinking about it, you also have a visual background. Does that help you? So does that feed the writing, or does the written word talk about visuals? So is that?
I think they feed off each other very effectively. Because the thing is that, I mean, when you begin fleshing something out, you don't know what that seed or the germ was. Sometimes, I'll give you an example, okay? My first graphic novel, Private Eye Anonymous, I didn't have like a fixed storyline for it, or I not even thought of the character. I was doodling in college, and I just happened to sketch this guy wearing a very old style, one of those French beret kind of hats.
Right.
And I just drew the nose, no mouth, no eyes, a trench coat, and a checkered trousers. So, as a character, that looked really interesting to me, and I said that, all right, this is nice. What would you call someone who doesn't have, a visible mouth and eyes? So he'd be anonymous, because those are the most, let's say, identifiable features of a person's face. And then the name also kind of, struck a chord, and I said, wow, nice, I like the name. So okay, he looks like a detective, and that's where I started writing.
Right.
So that's very much an instance of the visual preceding an idea even.
Okay.
And sometimes, obviously, it happens the other way around. You think of a line, and it takes you in an interesting direction, and then you want to start visually fleshing out what is it that world that you've just written the first line of, what does it look like?
Okay.
So,
Okay. And then, do you get these inspirations, or do you draw from your past, or do you draw from something that has been seen, communicated? How does that work?
I think all the time. I think all of us, we have our own experience to draw from, right? So I think every character that you write, practically every, they say you can't think of a face that you've never seen before. That's stunning. I don't know how far it's true, but I mean, I've come across this somewhere on the internet, which is, you can not always trust the authenticity of something you've read on the internet, but it's fascinating that I think we do draw a lot from experience, and it somewhere in our mind it amalgamates or coalesces into something that we now can't identify the root of.
Right.
But absolutely. So each of my characters has something of my own self in them, or at least my aspiration, at least my fears even, possibly, that I may not be able to play out or speak out in real life.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I mean, now that you say that, this maxim that said that, you don't draw, it's also said that you can't dream of somebody
Correct.
who you've not
I
seen.
think that's the,
that's the maxim.
That's the maxim.
So brings me to a question which says that what do you dream like? Do you remember your dreams? And do they become visual clues, or do they become written documents?
I don't think I'm a very lucid dreamer.
Okay.
So I mean, I just get some random dreams. I mean, I don't recall my dreams that.
Okay. Okay.
Sometimes I do, but that's not a very, let's say, trustworthy place for me as source material, I think.
Maybe you're living your dream. What does creativity mean to you? And just a pointed question, because you talked about the internet. It's also pointed towards the new generation, that has the internet really curbed on personal creativity? Is it becoming like the same homologous all over the world, or is it really special? Can you pick on that?
The thing is that I am actually very pro technology.
Okay.
So because I mean, it exists, no? It is an entity without character. It's not inherently good or bad.
Right.
So it's totally up to us how we end up using it. So if we see that there is, let's say, a proliferation of like very repetitive stuff, then it's our fault that we are not really expanding the frontiers of our creativity.
Correct.
But as just an entity, I think it's phenomenal, the internet or any kind of technology, because it allows you to do something that you've not been allowed to do till that point of time in human history. So isn't that absolutely incredible? So
I think that it's something that we have to obviously very consciously make good use of. But if you're able to do that, then that's wonderful. You know, the thing about technology is at some point of time, read about this in a beautiful book called Color. I forget the name of the author. But she said that obviously all paints were also handmade, no? Like the artists of like probably the pre-Renaissance or maybe even in the Renaissance times would make their own pigment.
Correct.
And so for them, ready acrylic paint that came in a tube that you could squeeze was technology. So imagine if they said that we don't believe in this technology.
Correct.
Right? So it's not really something inherently good or bad. It's just that something that allows you to cross the frontiers of your own experience.
Right.
And for that, I'm very much in favor of
course.
using technology.
Of course, of course. Technology, I mean, so it's also one of the tools, I understand. I
Yes.
completely understand. But availability of ideas is what I'm trying to point at.
I got it, yeah.
Because what happens is, for you, you generated, let's say, the private eye, anonymous, through a process.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if I say that, okay, give me alternatives of what could be visual, visually a private eye,
Sure.
I'll get thousands. Now, what I think as a person is, what can I think beyond these thousands?
Absolutely.
But then I believe that you are saying that it's how you take it.
Absolutely. No, I know where you're coming from. Because the thing is that, like the internet, you have a lot of applications, you've got very powerful software
Right.
that, quickly, let's say, makes you, or takes your initial thought and fleshes it out automatically almost for you at a level that makes it seem concrete. Now, that is a very scary thing in the sense that if you're not careful, it can just completely preclude that entire thought process that would otherwise very organically lead you to a concept or an
Right,
idea.
right,
You know?
right.
And so I think one thing you have to realize is that human evolution happens a lot slower than the technological curve. So we are, as of now, probably not able to catch up internally as human beings as quickly as we think we can. In the sense that, to illustrate what I'm saying, is that for millennia, no, right from like cave drawings, and people have used, let's say, graphite or charcoal or chalk or whatever it is to flesh their ideas out on a cave wall, on something else, on fabric, on leather, on temple walls. And there is a certain, let's say, temporal distance between your first thought and when you start actually finalizing it and giving it concrete shape. And that allows you to just weed out all the unnecessary bits, weed out all the inherent flaws maybe in your initial impulse. What a software does is that you can quickly flesh out and almost make final your first impulse. And then you are so committed to it that you probably can't think from any other perspective, and that is dangerous.
Correct.
So I would say that not losing, sketches, primary sketches are so fundamentally important to any creative process, because for millennia, this simple tool has become almost an extension of your brain.
Correct.
And which a mouse or a tablet or a software isn't yet, I think.
Right.
It's great to give it final shape.
Right.
But I think not losing touch with sketches, also they're fluid enough, no? They sort of allow you to toy with the idea, which a very final concretized design may not allow you.
Correct. I would want to talk more about this, but I think let's shift to your writing. I think you also write in Marathi.
I write poems in Marathi.
Yeah, but I mean, you're actually from St. Vincent's, which talks about
Fellow Vincent.
absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, I remember my times, but of course your times were different because there was still a little strictness about English.
There was.
We used to speak in Marathi in school as well. But what happens is, how did you transit between, let's say, being in a convent school, learning everything in English, to maybe writing something which is so point for cinema?
Yeah. So funnily, I think the fact that there was so little exposure to Marathi through my formative years made me almost look at it as a new discovery when I got into Abhinav. Abhinav Kala Mahavidyalaya is a very vernacular
Yeah,
atmosphere.
absolutely.
And since you know that like even two students sharing the same vernacular language will speak in English
Correct.
in any setup like St. Vincent's.
Right.
So when I actually, and at home obviously we used to speak Marathi, but that time you're not looking at it as a language, you're just looking at it as a tool of communication. I mean, you're not concentrating on it as a language. What happened was when I got into Abhinav Kala Mahavidyalaya, and that it was like I was experiencing the actual language for the first time. So I started reading Marathi, which I never would previously in school. I started attending, let's say, Marathi plays, Sangeet Natak, and it was like a new discovery. It was an epiphany, and I inherently enjoy languages.
Right.
I like the sound of words. I like, studying etymology and how words. So for me, it was like fascinating that the language I've been speaking my entire life, but not really knowing the depth of.
How nice.
And so I took to it almost like a newfound passion. So what I would do is, when I was reading any book in Marathi, that would be accompanied by a Marathi to English dictionary, as well as an exercise book. And any word that I did not know, I would stop reading. I would jot that word, look it up in the dictionary, jot it down, write the meaning, and write the example of its usage.
Brilliant.
So it was almost like
Brilliant.
like a personal cause that I did for myself because I was enjoying doing it. I mean, it wasn't a chore.
Right.
I liked doing that. So then, a funny thing that happened immediately after, like the fallout of that, was you start right. Everyone starts doing poetry in college, right? I mean, that's
Well,
the okay. So I started using words suddenly that were very archaic.
Okay.
Not realizing that they are really not words that fit into the, let's say, common parlance of Marathi contemporary. We don't use those words anymore because for me, I was learning almost all like slightly let's say, colloquial words for the first time.
Okay.
So I would use any sudden archaic word that would stump even, let's say, people of like who are really good in the language. I said, where did you come out with that from? And it doesn't really. So it took a while for me to realize that okay, these are like really archaic words. These were used in that century. These are the words that, whatever. So
Right,
that was a funny phase also.
The word used to be in a poem because it rhymed with something?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
So it rhymed with something and I'd like pull something out because it rhymes, but then often it doesn't fit the linguistic context, no? It's
Right.
like,
Right. Great. Great. Yeah. So, but do you think that I mean, if you were to choose between English and Marathi, there's no comparison per se. But I find that even me, I mean, this conversation's also happening in English. But generally, the young generation, they're looking at Marathi as a second language, and English being the primary. Would there be a possibility, or what would you say? Why should they look at Marathi? Those who can, of course.
I mean, why should? Okay, yeah.
I mean, how? I mean, why
How
is not
can
the
they?
question.
Yeah.
How can they do that?
I mean, I think it. So as practically almost anything in life, it needs to really, personally, be a motivation to speak a language, right?
Right.
And I think you can't really pick languages. Now, this does happen though. Most of my poetry is in Marathi, and a lot of my work in comics is in English. I don't know why, but probably the language carries the initial impulse of the thought. I don't know what it is. I have done poetry in English, but I mean, what I've done in Marathi far outnumbers my poems in English, and I've made no comics in Marathi. So I'm not really consciously picking a language, but sometimes the initial impulse just comes with its own language.
Okay.
What I would think is that, however, any language, every language would have its own inherent beauty, and it's not really translatable. When you realize when you are trying to, let's say, subtitle your own film, sometimes if you literally try and translate a Marathi joke into English, it just falls flat because there's no way of, there's no historical or linguistic context to it. So you can't do it.
Right.
Then a lot of times it's just forms of addressing a person, or it's so completely different. No? We consider language on just one plane, and actually language is not on one plane.
Right.
It's got everything. It's got social history, it's got context, it's got customs, it's got religion, all of it ingrained into it.
Correct.
And that's what eventually comes out on that primary layer of communicative language.
Right.
So understanding a language is almost understanding not just of another way of communicating, but understanding another culture, I would say, and
Interesting.
another set of beliefs, maybe another philosophy, even.
Interesting. I mean, a friend of mine had come from the US. She used to study with me, and then she went back, studied there. Just remembering one of a similar conversation that I had.
Sure.
And she said that we were sitting in Vaishali, and there were people speaking around, and she says, I can't understand what they're saying.
Okay.
They were speaking Marathi,
Right.
or they were speaking Minglish or whatever.
Correct.
So she says, I can't understand. And she understands Marathi, she understands English. She was saying that language is actually like a code.
Right.
And it's set in your mind.
Absolutely. Yes.
So each word, each syllable, each pronunciation has a kind of a history, like you said,
Right.
and has a connect,
Absolutely.
which she'd lost.
Correct. Absolutely.
And
Not
she'd
having
come
been
after
here.
some years, but
Sure.
it had changed completely.
Oh, yes,
and then
yes, yes.
for me, it was not a change.
Correct,
Because
correct.
I differentially, I just grew in it.
Absolutely.
And then she says, I can't understand one word of what they're saying. So it's interesting that you say it, and it just gets me back to this.
No, that's very interesting. It is a code,
Yeah.
and that will keep slightly shifting like through the years.
I want to talk about your film.
Sure.
There are multiple things that I want to talk to you about. Is how does a script happen? Like, because it's a written thing which has to be converted into an experiential art form.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's like a mix of both. But I mean, I don't know how it goes about, how you trained yourself to do that, or how did it come about? Give us some incidences that happened, or some.
Sure. So I got into it. I mean, I've done no formal course in script writing or anything. In fact, after Gulab Jam was released, I actually did a film appreciation course at FTII just to understand, learn the ropes a little, let's say, academically. But and every script writer would probably have his or her own way of writing a script. So there's no one fixed formula. The way I go about it is that you think of an initial impulse, and so a script has a few components, right? The story, the screenplay, and the dialogue. So the story is what happens. What happens is the story, and how it happens, the experience that you spoke of,
Right.
is the screenplay.
Correct.
Because screenplay is descriptive of the various elements that, let's say, coordinate with each other on screen to bring about the desired, let's say, progression in the story,
Right.
and the emotion in the minds of the audience. So that is, let's say, because also I've not academically studied scripts, I don't have a set of things that I do like a religious thing before getting down to it. I approach a script in very different ways, in the sense there is no fixed methodology that I employ. But obviously, first is getting the draft of the story from point A to point Z, and then what is it's a job of cutting out all. You think of a lot of things when you're writing.
Correct.
When you think of a story, you think of innumerable things.
Correct.
And then the choice you make at the screenplay level is what most effectively brings out what you want to say at this moment in that character's journey.
Okay.
Story.
Okay.
So sometimes, like they say, the best way to retain a scene in your mind or not retain it is that, is it moving the needle forward? Is it saying something? If it's just adding to something you've said before, just knock it off. And sometimes the films are better for that lithe kind of storytelling. So that's what I usually do. Obviously, Sachin and I end up making several drafts. Now first film is released. My first film is writer, obviously. He's a lot senior, but we have another one that awaits release. It's called Pondicherry. There's another one that we are writing now. Each of them went into multiple drafts.
Right.
So it's not even that you're working on it. If you're working on it, let's say over a period of a year and a half, then let's say you've taken 2 months actively on it. Then you've stayed away from the script for maybe a month or 6 weeks. Then you get back to it, and it goes into several drafts.
So is there an iteration happening on the
There is
scripts?
an iteration happening on the
Okay.
scripts because it's very essential. Because what happens is when you flush it out for the first time, you're so in love with it. You
Right.
think it's like the best
Absolutely.
story in the world.
Absolutely.
And obviously it isn't. It's not likely to be, right?
Right.
So to even get to dissociate yourself from it enough to give you the perspective about certain corners that you may have written yourself into, or certain flaws that the story may have. You need that distance to even look at it objectively.
Interesting.
So I stand away from a script.
It's so interesting that you say this because I would connect 2 points here that as designers, we tend to fall in love with the first sketch that we've made and then that carries forward also because of the computer.
Yes, absolutely. I think
that's
this
the
ties to what we were just saying.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Because then it's there, you
It's
see
there,
it finished.
it exists, yeah.
Yeah, and it's finished. I mean, it's fair enough.
Correct.
So why would you change it? So I would definitely put this question: why would you change a script?
No, the thing is that, it's not about, doing it out of some compulsive sense. It's just that sometimes you get somewhere where, okay, I'll give you a very interesting example someone gave me a few years ago. And that's like, I always think of this. That, okay, you're driving and you're looking for a place to park. All right, and then you're inching your way. You don't know where that parking space is and how you're ever going to find it. And so, at the same time, a person on the balcony of a building, looking down at the road, knows exactly where you're going to find a parking space.
Right.
So sometimes it's important to have that perspective,
Right.
and you can have that perspective when you're not on the wheel.
Correct. Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Because you can't see it. It's
Right.
just that.
Right.
From that perspective, you lose sight of certain things that have come from your first impulse.
Right.
And
Right.
I believe in iterating and just polishing and just weeding away all the unnecessary elements. The thing is that the more foolproof a script that you'll have, it's likely that you'll just naturally end up making a better film.
Brilliant. Brilliant. That's such an amazing thing to say because then you are also the driver and also the onlooker.
Yeah, you have that other perspective. So why would you not want that perspective?
Absolutely, absolutely. Gets me to one more point of the cinema. You also worked as a production designer. What does that entail? I mean, and you, I mean, were you really empowered for that job? Did you really do some kind of education, or how does it work?
No, I didn't. So in fact, I did that even prior to my script writing, right? That was my gateway into film, and like I mentioned, like completely serendipitous. I just some of my work that someone happened to see got me, this opportunity. So I had the time that Sachin asked if I wanted to do the production design. I'd never even heard the term. So I was hearing the term for the first time, and I didn't know what that meant. I had done absolutely nothing prior to it, to being, in a way equipped to like doing it on set. But again, the point was that he said you make comics, and a comic book is a frozen film.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So in a way, you have almost been through the trenches. You've almost done everything that will allow you to extend that capacity to designing for a film.
Right.
So what a production designer does primarily is actually translate the director's vision into what will appear on screen.
Okay.
So you have to coordinate between the camera and lighting department, the art department that actually will design the sets, put up the colors that you have in mind, and the costume department, so that the whole thing looks very color coordinated on the monitor.
Right.
So you sit beside the director on the monitor to make sure that everything is absolutely in place. That's your job as a production designer. And because I'd made comics and I would like physically draw every object on it, and so I would understand composition, I would understand space division, I would understand color theory. So it was almost just an extension of that I had to apply.
Correct. So what you're saying is maybe the costume designer has picked up the same colored costume in front of a similar background.
Yes, that can happen because so part of the production designer's role is to create a color palette for the film. So,
Right.
and we were very stringent about the color palette that, there were two colors that were absolutely no-no. So one of them was like a bright lemon yellow. And a funny thing that I remember on set was that the breakfast scene, and they had pohe, and I was like, shit, that actually doesn't fit the color scheme. We don't want yellows. But so to that extent,
मग कोथिंबीर खाते का त्याच्यात?
कोथिंबीर घातली कांदा. But in the sense, it was to that level that we were trying to, manage that color. Obviously, you have post-processing, and in post-production, you can tweak colors. All of that happens, but
Correct.
it's great to begin with a very good, like a very tangible and good color scheme.
Oh.
So that happens. I mean, so you convey the color scheme to all the departments, but that still can happen. And in one particular scene, you might have the costume guy, like you said, giving the same colored shirt as the background, and you don't want those accidents,
Right.
because that will eat away your shooting time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
the production designer's role is to make sure that all of this is logistically also covered and not just creatively.
Yeah, it almost resembles a master architect, but
Sure.
but you know what? You were pretty young then, and controlling all these people who feel that they have established in their field. So trying to tie the knots, or telling them to work in with your vision or with the director's vision, they think they know.
Yeah,
So was it really was it really a journey for you?
It in the sense that it did not even get into that conflict zone, because at the time of Happy Journey, I was such a reluctant guy on set. I used to hate going on set, and sometimes the art director is just like happier when the production designer is not on set.
Correct.
So I think I may have resolved some conflict just out of my aversion to going on a set. I love going on a set now, but at that point of time I didn't. So, but obviously I had communicated everything I wanted to even prior to beginning the film. So at Happy Journey it didn't go to the point where a first timer was having to
Right.
sort of lord it over anyone. That never really happened, and we had a great team. So I think we collaborated.
Yeah,
well.
of course, that is always there. I mean, every architect after the project is over says, "Arey, we had a great time." We don't really say what happened in
During-
between.
But I think that's great. No?
That's great.
Because,
Yeah, that's absolutely
yeah,
great. So
I
were you
love
were
that
you also starstruck with the actors, or did you never interact with them?
No, I did interact with them, but somehow I wasn't that starstruck for some reason. Also because the actors themselves were very like human and very grounded, so they didn't come with an air of being
Right.
like slightly elevated than everyone else. That didn't happen. So
Right.
so they didn't really espouse that feeling, so it didn't filter down to me at all.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So you've been through the comic book story. Then you also have these poems where you also published a few or printed a few, and then you have also been through cinema, script, songs. Songs. I mean,
Song
would,
also, yeah,
would
yeah.
you would you want to elaborate on these the story behind the song?
So yeah, in the sense that when 2013 the work on Happy Journey happened, 2014 Happy Journey was released. So while the work was going on and I was doing the production design, Sachin knew that because I think would share my work with him. So he knew that I was writing poems, and so there came a time when this one song had to be written in Happy Journey that was picturized on Priya Bapat.
Right.
And he said that I think I've read your poems and I think that's kind of your zone. So do you want to give it a shot?
Right.
So I said, yeah, like why not? Because I always end up saying yeah. And so the Karan Kulkarni, the music director, he had a beautiful tune that he had created for that song.
Right.
So I wrote to that tune.
Right.
And that was an exercise for me very different to writing a poem, because it's like almost diametrically opposite, right? Because a poem, it's only about yourself, you're completely self-absorbed, and it's almost, you're writing it out of a sense of not being able to stop yourself.
Correct.
And
होती है.
होती है. And when you're writing lyrics, you are writing it for somebody else's story,
Right.
and you're writing it for a very disjointed narrative happening in a film, and in this case the tune was also set, so you're writing to a tune.
Right.
So that was a very different experience, but I really enjoyed it. So that happened. I wrote one song for Happy Journey, and then Rajwade and Sons, he said that give it a shot. I like what you did with Happy Journey. So I wrote both the songs in Rajwade. What happened with one of them was, with Tagmag, was that I actually, I thought of the tune first.
Oh. Oh.
And I sort of, the tune helped me write the song.
Right.
Because it was like a very catchy riff.
Oh.
So I said, I'm using the tune to help me write the song. And then I can just give the printed thing to the director. It's up to him, to the music director. But then that tune itself was so catchy that we decided to retain it.
Nice.
So
Nice.
that's how that song happened.
Lovely.
Every song will happen differently.
Lovely.
So I've not written too many. Pondicherry has one. So Pondicherry would be my fifth song, I think. So that's
Lovely.
not too much.
So I was just, stopped midway when I thought about the songs. But then my question ends with what next? I mean, you've been through a journey. What next? How does it? And you've retained all these, all that you've learned or all that you've used earlier.
Sure.
They become a part of you. You still emphasize on it. And now what?
So I think the best, the thing that excites me most about this question is not fully being able to answer it.
Right.
So I absolutely don't know what next. I mean, I do know certain things, and I definitely want to do those. Like I said, I'm creatively too greedy. I keep picking things up, and I'm not letting go of anything else. I want to do everything.
Right.
So I want to do things that I may not have come across so
Right.
far. So gaming, for example, I'm not a gamer myself, but I love how games these days have adopted such complex and subtle techniques of storytelling. So it sort of calls to me as a writer, as an artist. So it could be something in gaming, but yeah, I don't know, and I just want to be fluid enough to actually pursue something that just might pop up tomorrow.
So I look forward to, let's say, a game happening with your song playing in the background with your lyrics.
That would be something.
That's a brilliant thing. But I think, I want to talk to him more. There are more things that, of course, there would be a part 2 of this maybe. We'll talk about that later. But I think...
Or
we
maybe
come-
down in the cafeteria.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the camera can follow us. But I think I covered most of my questions as to what your journey was. And it was brilliant to know how you pick points, how the points are connected. I remember Steve Jobs saying that, you create these points and then where they connect is something that you leave to the universe. But I think you definitely create points with the knowledge that you want to go there and connect them to the past. So thanks a lot, Tejas.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Mayuresh, sir. I really enjoyed talking to you.
absolutely.
तो माइक
माइक ऑन नहीं, ऑन नहीं है.
Thank you so much, Tejas sir and Mayuresh sir. This was indeed an amazing dialogue, a very different insight on creative forms of literature and architecture, which is surely imbibed in our minds forever. Now I would like to request Surabhi ma'am to come on the stage for the concluding statement.
Hello, good morning everyone. Good morning, sir. So Tejas sir said he was not intimidated or starstruck when he went on set, but I think today all of us sitting here are pretty not intimidated, but in awe of the amount of creativity and talent that is here on stage today. And of course, I mean, we know how talented Mayuresh sir is. We've always known that, but it's great to just hear whatever you had to say today. And just a few points that, I found really interesting when it comes to, how you're talking about how each frame in a story has to push it forward, right? So similarly, I was just relating this to architecture and thinking how, our students maybe could think of this as something, at the back of their head. You're always thinking of a story, right, when you're talking about architecture. And maybe it's even simple things, even if it's a construction process, it's still a story, right? Everything that happens on site, it has to be like a story. Or if it's a religious building, there's something you're talking about scriptures, you're talking about the history, you're talking about the place. So everything that we design too is always a story. It's a narrative. So it's so great to see the link between these different. They're not art forms, but different fields or different.
I think ways of expression.
Ways
And I
of
think they're
expression.
inherently
Absolutely.
connected. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So we use so many of the of your architectural terms, like
Yeah.
it's a structure, right?
It's a structure.
Screenplay.
Or it's a space
Or
that
it's
when you are talking about production design too, I'm sure you're thinking about the space that you're
Absolutely.
creating on screen.
Right.
So that's great. And also something that you said, which I have personally been facing a lot in the last few years. So I am a master's in digital architecture.
All right.
So everyone tells me your tools scare us and they are not what we want to do. Our students get very influenced by these tools. And what Sir said, that we start with a small, form that we draw on that tool, and then you're just stuck. Then you're just there and you're not able to move forward. So again, I mean, coming back to what we always stress, that we have to all understand what you said, stepping back and thinking of design as an iterative process. So similarly for you also, I'm sure when you say that you step back, you think of it as an iterative process where you have to go back and,
Absolutely.
come up with a new idea again, if
Yeah.
need be.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great takeaway for all our students too, that don't get, so attached to what you start off with. Sometimes it's not what you really want at the end. It's just
That's
your
true.
initial seed of thought.
Correct. Correct.
So yeah, I think
Yeah, so you can come back to it.
you can come back to it, and
But
it may
move
still
ahead.
be there in a sense.
Right,
But
true.
you don't have to say that, oh, like I will stick to this because I started with this and now I'm 3 weeks into my design.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Correct.
So I think that is something that our students really, really need to take back from this. Because I mean, I'm sure Sir also knows that we all tend to get very attached to what we're doing, and you think that now it's too late to do so.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think that's all I had to say. But
Yeah.
great, amazing session, and
Thank you so
we really hope there is a part 2 of this too.
No, I think next time I can ask Mayuresh sir. the
Yeah,
question.
definitely.
Flip the sides.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
sit
yeah.
on that couch.
Yeah. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mayuresh sir.
Thank you.
Tejas
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you
It's
for
been
having
a great
us.
pleasure to
Thank
be
you,
here
Tejas.
today.
Thank you. I
It was
really
such
enjoyed
a
doing this.
delightful conversation.
It
Thank
was.
you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Surabhi ma'am. Now I would like to proceed with the vote of thanks. On behalf of Kaladhar Bnca Art Club, I am extremely grateful to our principal Dr. Anurag Kashyap for being a constant source of inspiration, for his support and encouragement. I wish to thank our eminent guest speakers, Mr. Tejas Modak and architect Mayuresh Shirokar, sir. We are glad to have you here, sir. Thank you for giving us your time and sharing immense knowledge and experiences with us. A hearty thanks to Surabhi ma'am, Shruti ma'am, Neeraja ma'am, Joshi sir for their valuable participation in the event. I would like to extend my gratitude towards Amrita ma'am, Mahesh sir and Kavita ma'am for their guidance and support. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated student volunteers and committee members of the club. A special thanks to all of them for their teamwork and immense efforts. I would also like to thank all faculty members, IT department, admin department, who have contributed to make this event successful. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the audience present online. Thank you. Looking forward to your presence for the upcoming sessions in this series. Have a good day. Thank you.